To call the meeting to order. Tiffany, will you call the roll?
Yes, Chair Bernard Green,
Yes, here.
Dick Benka,
I'm here.
Ruth Ellen Fitch, Jeff Rudolph,
Here.
Sergio Modigliani,
Here.
Janet Gelbart,
Here.
Sadaf Kazmi,
Here.
Sarah Mocktener.
She's not gonna be here.
Okay, Jesse Hefter.
Here.
So Jesse, you can vote today. John Doggett,
Here.
John Van Scoyoc, and Cliff.
He's not a voting member.
Okay, he is an alternate, and Cliff Brown is an alternate. Is Cliff Brown in the room?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm sorry, excuse me, Tiffany, there is somebody with a phone number ending in
oh,
969.
thank you. I will admit them. Okay,
I do not know who they are. They may have been one of the individuals you called.
no one let me know that they were calling in. If the person who just joined, who's listening in by phone, if you are a committee member, I'd suggest sending an email or sending me a text message to let me know that you're a committee member so you can be admitted as a committee member.
Oh, yeah. It's not. Okay, let's get going. We just have a new member, Bella Wong. Introduce yourself and let people know, one, that you're here and who you are and all that.
All right. Well, my name is Bella Wong. I'm very pleased to be serving as the interim superintendent of schools this year. And I'm very interested in being part of this committee as you look forward to planning.
Whatever it is, we're gonna try.
Thank you. Whatever it is that
We're
you.
not commenting yet because we haven't gone to the media here.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get going. Starting off with approving the minutes for June 25th, 2025 and July 7th, 2025. Let's start with June 25th. Any corrections to the minutes of June 25th? No. I move approval of the minutes for June 25th then.
Second.
Tiffany, can you call the vote?
Yes, I can. I apologize. Dick Benka. Oh,
Aye.
you seconded. Ruth Ellen Fitch. Oh, she's not here. Jeff Rudolph.
I'm going to abstain since I missed that meeting.
Okay, Sergio Modigliani.
Aye.
Janet Gelbart.
Aye.
Sadaf Kazmi.
Aye.
Jesse Hefter.
Aye.
John Doggett.
Aye.
And that's it for the voting members. Oh, Bernard Green.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next, July 7, 2025. I have some comments. Anyone else?
I have a couple of little, I guess they're typo kind of things.
Sorry, before you do those, Anissa, can you capture these since you helped us with the minutes for this meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
So in the last full paragraph about the fire department, it says Chief John. I think it should say Chief Sullivan. And then in the third paragraph, under DPW, it's quoting Alexandra Vecchio. It should spell out her name. It just says Alexandra V. It might also help to put in her title for people who don't know who she is.
Yeah, maybe we need a protocol for how we describe people. For example, in some of the minutes that Dan Ben is called Daniel. We use other first names. Maybe that's nitpicking, but that's my type of thinking. Right. Okay, Cliff suggested that we introduce ourselves. Let's go through the next set of minutes before we do that. Okay, any other corrections to the minutes? Okay, I'd like to make a correction, and that is where we are describing the discussion we had with Kara Bruton. I am quoted as saying that it's my belief that there's already affordable housing available in the town. I did not say that. I would not say that because it would impede my ability to run for higher office if I were foolish enough to do that. So could someone figure out what the correct, or just take that out? It doesn't seem to be relevant to anything.
We will do that.
Secondly, there was a reference to the fire department contracts. And we need to, I mean, people are interested in that. Someone needs to volunteer to follow that up. In other words, read the contracts and report to the committee, what they thought was important there. If that's, what people want to do. No? Okay, then never mind.
And the MOA was then circulated to the group and put in the packets, so you should have
Okay,
copies of that.
okay. Okay, with that, let's vote on minutes for July 7, 2025. Tiffany, can you call the roll?
Yes. Dick Benka,
As amended?
as
I said-
amended, Dick Benka? Oh, it looks like Dick dropped off. Okay, let's see. Ruth Ellen Fitch is now online. Ruth Ellen, we are approving the minutes for July 7th. Would you like to vote?
She might be muted.
Yep, Ruth Ellen, you might be on mute.
Why don't we go to, come back to her?
Okay, Jeff Rudolph.
Same. I abstained since I missed that meeting also.
Okay, Sergio Modigliani,
Aye.
Janet Gelbart,
Aye.
Sadaf Kazmi,
Aye.
Jesse Hefter,
Aye.
John Doggett,
Aye.
and Chair Green.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, that,
Oh, Ruth Ellen, would you like to vote on those minutes now? I see you're unmuted, but I don't think we can hear you. Okay, we can't hear Ruth Ellen.
okay. So why don't we go around and introduce ourselves? Suggestion of Cliff. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Select Board and Chair of this committee. Chaz?
I'm Chess Carey, the town administrator.
Jesse Hefter, Brookline School Committee, the alternate.
And the person who really needs to know all of this.
And again, I'm Bella Wong, serving as the interim superintendent of schools this year.
I'm Sergio Modigliani, member of the chair of the advisory committee, holding a number of positions around the 10 prior years.
I'm Sadaf Kazmi. We met last week, and I'm a member of the committee.
Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator, Wigman.
Lincoln Heineman, the Director of Finance for the town.
Anissa Benjamin, finance intern.
John Doggett, Advisory Committee Representative.
Janet Gelbart, member of the community, member of the committee.
Cliff Brown, member of the advisory committee, chair of the school subcommittee, on the alternate on this committee.
And on the screen, we have Jeff Rudolph. Jeff, introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jeff Rudolph, town meeting member and also a member of the committee.
Okay, who else? Is Ruth Ellen Fitch tuned in?
Ruth Ellen Fitch is unmuted, but we still can't hear her.
Okay. Is Dick Benka still?
Dick Benka still dropped off.
Dick Benka is a former chair of the select board and ran about town.
Current town meeting.
Turn County. Okay, so with that, let's move on to the discussion of the schools. Questions that were prepared by various members of the committee. Who would like to lead that discussion?
Dick unfortunately was the lead on this.
And Sarah. So,
We've gone through several iterations of it. The most recent one is listed as version 3 in your packet. And we also have, you know, so you can see there's been kind of several iterations of this. I don't know, I saw your email set up, I'm not sure if we incorporated that. Not yet. Okay.
Sort of, yeah.
But Jesse, you were involved in kind of the discussions on this. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit through?
Well, I mean, yeah, Sarah and I did reflect on the questions that Sergio and Dick put together. It's gone through a couple of iterations. And the list of questions that Dick provided that are listed, I think, as version 3.
Yeah.
Also, I believe it appeared as well under like a heading as if to be sent, like with names, you know, to Bill and Karen Schmucker, et cetera. But in either case, I guess we could talk through the V3 version. I'm not sure which one of the two you want to put on the screen or want people to refer to. There's the V3 one, and then there's the 4-pager.
The 4-pager dates back from from June.
Well, there's a July 21.
Oh, is there? I did.
July 21.
Yeah,
July 21 might be that.
Yeah.
Yep, July 21 is the most recent one. Would you like to would you like me to put that on screen?
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
give me 2 seconds.
can I suggest that people also read Sarah Mockfather's email about the questions? I thought she raised some important points. And we don't have to talk about it now, but
Okay, it's now on screen, I believe.
Yes. Right, so I think what we want to be careful about, and I think Sarah pointed this out in her response as well, she and I talked about this, was that we don't ask the school department to we don't task them with like an impossible amount of time to take and get everything together that might be required for us to make decisions, especially given the fact of all the flux in central office right now. So as well as trying to get everything organized to with sort of, you know, some key staff functions still not with personnel, that sending people off on an analytical project for what might be many hours or days of work to get data just needs to be carefully considered in terms of how long it might take and then how useful what we get was going to be. Nevertheless, there are, I think, 4 or 5 big question areas that Dick came up with. Sarah and I had originally presented Dick and Sergio with a document that listed links to at least some of the data that answers those questions. But the most recent version doesn't seem to seem to move back to just a series of questions without the answers or potential data sources in them. The biggest one had to do that, which is showing on the screen now, is about special education. I think the reason for that is because, as we discussed in previous meetings, there's a lot of variability in how much gets spent, in particular based on the mix, you know, of students that both, even though students age out, there are unknowns about how many students come into the system. There are also going to be students that start in the general education population and over time need more support. And so even, you know, the school department's going to do its best job to estimate what's going to happen. There can be situations in which, through, for example, the IEP process finally determines, for example, that a student may have to go out of district. And it raised a whole bunch of questions that we've talked about here in this committee regarding the costs involved. That it's hard to track those costs, and so we can read through these questions. I'm not sure everyone's had a chance to look at them, so I'm happy to go through them. And if people have questions, we're not going to necessarily provide the answers. And Bella, certainly we're not asking you to provide answers to any of this right off the top is going to require some time. One, I think that we have seen Dr. Givens and Dr. Schmucker had provided updates on this that could be pulled, I think, is providing any analyses that the district has done of costs associated with out of district and settlement placements. By settlement, I think here, Sarah and I meant both the cost of legal fees that might be accrued to the town by having to bring a legal action in order to get the settlement happen. And the second thing is that any associated costs, those could be retroactive payments for tuition up until the time parents were paying until the district agreed. And then in general, so it has a tuition component and also has a legal component. But out of district, one of the questions that you'll see a bit later has to do with how do we choose the appropriate out of district, the least restrictive environment out of district, and to what extent can PSB provide us with a clear picture or view of, are we doing this to the best extent possible, and in a sense minimally. In other words, are we overboard in any areas in terms of sending people where we could potentially serve them within the district as well. The second one is it relates to what I was just mentioning, is are there practices in place or something available that we could utilize to decrease the number of students in special ed while excelling at meeting student needs. So this is a tricky one because of course we need to provide free and appropriate support to every student. And yet we did have a question that came up in Dick and Sergio's original document. Sarah and I discussed it as well. And I think it's worth asking, are there ways in determining whether or not at any edges of the system, there are ways of bringing some of the students back into the general ed population rather than how well a job did we do in the required and timely reviews of students' progress, so that we're able to determine whether or not a time comes when that student could require perhaps less services rather than say the historical services that they've gotten. With MTSS coming in, multi-tier systems of support for students, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, do we anticipate that the number of students that require support will increase or potentially decrease as we move this process or approach along within the school district? I know at the end of last year, we got some reports out from Dr. Fortuna about how this was going. Matt Dubois, who's the psychologist on staff, also has the school psychology side of things, and social emotional learning gave us a report on this at school committee. And it's in the middle of being rolled out. So we don't know yet. I think it's probably the school department's answer, but we can still anticipate what might happen based on what we see.
Just a request that would be here and in other places that we put in a brief explanation about what some of these things are for those of us not involved, where it's jargon, and on the hope that people are actually going to read this or are sitting through it. Right. So 1 or 2 sentences, both there and later on, there's a reference to section 24 of chapter 218 of the Acts of 2016. What on earth is it? I think it would be very helpful as we move forward, not just the school side, but all of us, to avoid jargon, and the 1 or 2 line explanations can get us through an awful lot.
Or footnote, for example, that statute.
Yeah,
we don't need to go into it.
Right. I will say that in one of the versions of this, it's heavily sprinkled with hyperlinks to all that stuff. So I don't believe that this version, as I see it here, there's one or two, but the other one is liberally sprinkled with links. Everything from like how to define Medco to MTSS, for example. We'll make sure we go back and do it. Part of the issue with this as well is that Sergio and Dick have been working on it.
Right.
And then it's been like passed to Sarah and I, and then we send it back. And this was the most recent version we got back. So things change between the versions. And I'm happy to take that as an action item though, and
just
go from top to bottom and pull all of them out and make sure you have it.
Yeah, and totally. Just so that we know what we're talking about without having to go back and forth online to pull up the links.
Oh, yeah. I'm saying it. We'll make sure,
And by the way, these are questions that we're going to give to the schools.
Correct.
So I'm not sure that you need to try to answer the questions.
I was going to say that. Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, we'll be here for a long time. I guess there's a lot here. The current analysis of the caseloads and workloads for special ed. This is, I think, a very fair question. Sarah and I talked a lot about it. It's important that the community know that we're well balanced in terms of the number of people we have doing special ed support and the number of students that they see. I know Dr. Schmalker has done some work in this area. Are they appropriate when considering the cost and meeting needs? And then how to decide the groupings, the number of special ed educators, number of paras, paraprofessionals who are the assistants per grouping compared to DESE standards. So that should be gettable. I mean, we have all, it's a numerical analysis, just going to take some time to bring it together. And then there's one of the questions we'd asked everybody, I'm saying this for Bella's benefit, we asked all departments where are the potentials for generating revenue. And so the three we came up with, there's not a lot. I mean, you know, it's free school education. So we're generally, you know, taking money to run the school system, but maximizing our circuit breaker, because there is fun. And again, we'll put in information about what this is. This is a payback amount from the state for special ed students that are that get support within the school system, and then maximizing Medicaid and then tuition in students. What we are bringing in students, for example, there are about just under 200 students that are paying a small tuition. It'll come up later, I think, on the materials fees, where their parents or staff in the school district, and we provide them with a very small. It's about $3,500, I think, for FY26 for the year of education. Obviously, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 students, that's a lot of money a year to pay for the education to be in the district. And there's some staff who then keep their kids if they need, for various reasons, maybe not coming to PSB, even though they're working here. But that is another opportunity, of course, if we're going to look at all the different potentials for revenue generation. And then some other recommendations that were added in here. This Education Stabilization Fund is part of the town school partnership. We've, I think Chaz had talked about it before. And this would be a way of basically protecting, I guess all of us. I don't want to say us and them because it's one town, but protecting both the schools in the event of running out of money or not having enough funding versus what the budget request is, and then not putting additional pressure on the town. And the B answer there is, you know, that B question is for unanticipated or unbudgeted costs out of district tuition. These can range, by the way. You know, there's nothing to stop a out of district, for example, facility for raising its prices for any number of reasons. And then if we've already got students going to those locations, then our price goes up. Bus costs can go up, you know, as contracts change, things like that. Some details also on about monthly Office of Student Services calibration meetings. This is so that both, I think, somewhere else it says, monthly report to the school committee as well, so that we have regular spotlighting on what's going on, some light on how well are the Office of Student Services the needs of parents being met. This way, it's clearer to everyone. It does take work as well, but you know, perhaps needs to be scheduled. This is a suggestion. Another one, monthly meetings between Office of Student Services and Office of Administration and Finance. Both of those deputy directors will be reporting to the interim superintendent. I'm just going to say, I know it's being reported, so I'm assuming that that's going to be happening anyway, without a doubt. One of the things that the community, as well, I think the school committee as well, have been asking for is these 2 items: a point in time out of district count and budget. Dr. Schmalker did bring a few to our attention as the year during the spring of this past year after the budget gap was handled, and then perhaps even dynamic budget reductions and adjustments through the year, so that we understand sort of where we're headed. Again, there's always sort of variation on that, please. But
I wasn't sure. Should I just be taking the information and then offer comments offline later, or I don't?
The way that most departments, and we'll hear some after this actually, is that they were provided some high level direction about some questions, and then they provided a presentation back to this committee with the answers. So there's so we'll come up with it.
No, I think that the point of these questions is to give it to the school department to answer.
That's
So, you know, our role here should be to gather additional information that should be incorporated into the questions. And I think if we try to, go into any greater detail, we're gonna be here all night.
Right, right. And so these are eventually gonna be, after agreed upon.
Yeah, so to, for example, like I would probably say, projected circuit breaker, you can't really maximize it. It is what it is. So it's just a word thing that, so just so you would know. And then, there should be monthly internal calibration, but maybe not a monthly report to school committee, because once the school year begins, you can see how that could, provide too much information for a particular family if you had a one big tuition in a certain month. So maybe it's like quarterly to mask that, so those would be the comments I would give. So not just more like nuance. Yeah.
So these are suggestions, Bella. So the idea will be is that the school department, I mean, Sarah and I are happy to work with you, of course. And partnering with you, and it would be generating a report based on this back to this committee. So if there's certain areas where you feel.
Sure, that's a big period.
I'm sorry?
I wasn't sure.
Oh, that's like,
whether
no.
there you
What
go.
I'm just saying is that, if there's certain questions you feel, this is the right question for us, I can give you a better answer to a slightly different question.
Okay.
For sure, did go that direction, just explain why.
Yeah.
So that we have a as clear a picture as to what's happening. That's the idea. These are guidepost questions.
So I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the real purpose here is to gather from the committee additional information or additional ways in which people think these questions should be formulated. So that, when we send it to the school committee or the school department, it's really in a form that can be easily answered and given back to us. And I assume everyone has reviewed these at some point, at some level, the question. So, if you have suggestions, this is the time to do it or to give them. And especially, Bella, if you have suggestions that we should hear about here in this meeting, and that would be very, very helpful.
Not just for you, question, if there are questions that need to be reframed.
Right.
There's stuff, if the questions, they're not gonna be helpful, like, for example, it's helpful to talk about circuit breaker and say, look, it's not. It's just creature of statute, it's based on the prior year, so it's not.
So we can do a projection, right?
Right.
Yeah, but and if there are questions that are not on here, I think we should be asking, I think that's the other part. It's one of the things the committee doesn't know to ask.
Right. I appreciate all the work that's gone into creating the questions, and interestingly, the other deputies and I haven't all been in the same place. So I haven't had the chance to review it with them. At first glance, the categories of the questions are pretty reasonable.
But this hasn't actually been mailed to them. So this is just, they wouldn't have known.
Oh, you wouldn't know.
No, this part at the top is only a draft.
Okay.
It hasn't been mailed out. Otherwise you can see that. So this is basically a work in progress. The idea today was to go over the questions, make sure we all agree. These are smart questions to ask, and then it'll get edited a little bit and then sent to you and your team.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
So let's just go piece by piece. Under special ed, does anyone have any suggestions in terms of edits to the questions? I mean, I can tell you two things on the special education bullet 5 and 6. I'd like to not only have the schools provide details on these issues, but also their comments as to whether these are good questions. So what are some of the problems in answering those questions?
You mean the two that start with please provide details?
Yeah. For example, is the revolving fund that's we set up under Chapter 218, Act 2016, and is that
That's what it was.
is that something that in the context of our school system makes sense, or our town? Does that make sense? I assume it does, but I'd like to get someone who knows more about this than I do to sort of confirm that.
If I may add, part of it is people not associated with the schools and maybe even people participating in the schools, we don't all have a good or common understanding of what these issues are about. And so if we're trying to project something about costs or improving systems or anything else, we need to do away with the myths of you can do this, you can do that, and just focus on what is doable that will help us understand what's going on and help us prevent some of the issues that surfaced in the last year. So that's where we're trying to go.
On the question of the stabilization fund, that's something actually that is usually determined in cooperation with town and
Yeah.
town administration, because we're all pulling from the same pie. And so when you slice apart to put it in here, it impacts the rest of the pieces. So that's usually something schools wouldn't say independently that they wanted to do without agreement with the town.
And then that's why it's being discussed at the town school partnership. But it has been raised, earlier this past spring, it has been already discussed a little bit at the town school partnership. I think some of these questions here reflect the fact that people have heard about certain things that are being discussed, and they're just trying to get everything together in one place so that, again, people have a common understanding of the information that's out there. And I think Janet's point about defining certain things, it's a comment that's been made before, I think is very helpful so that people do have that common baseline of knowledge.
Okay, anything else in special ed? Want to go to beach program?
I have one thing I would add when we've asked about fees in comparable communities. We should also look at what all the private pre-Ks are doing, because this is all part of one ecosystem. And if our fees are low, is that driving parents to us? If our fees are too high, is it driving kids who might want to be involved away from us? So it's a big group. There are tons of pre-Ks around here. So are we in the same ballpark would be helpful.
Yeah.
Making a distinction between BEEP and material state.
Actually,
Oh, yeah.
it's both, but I'm talking about the BEEP kids that are charged, not the kids that are required, but typically developing kids who are charged fees for BEEP, correct?
I think that question's only.
I saw it for comparable. I didn't see it for private. That's all.
Good.
Right, you mean for students, for young kids who are in alternatives to early education than me, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for typically developing kids.
Sorry.
Anything else on beach?
Dick Benka has his hand raised.
Dick? Dick?
And I now realize that was actually probably because he re-entered the room and I needed to re-promote him.
Okay.
Dick, did you want to add anything? I just promoted you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I had lost internet and thank you. I believe the question about comparable private entities is there with regard to BEEP. I certainly did intend to include it.
Could be I missed it, but I just saw the comparable.
Would you kindly provide information regarding in
Fourth.
comparable school districts and by providers other than PSB and Brookline, e.g. for-profit and not-for-profit providers?
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
Okay, anything else on B? Let's move on to Metco. Any questions or comments about Metco? I'm sure there are none, right?
One thing I think I'd like to see added here is the question, since the number of students that we take is defined by ourselves. That, as I think Dr. Avery pointed out, it's been 300, I think, students that we take over the last, ever since the program began. So the question in my mind is, this is a discretionary, although it's very popular and important to us. But the question is, are there any direct savings if you eliminated the program, or if you reduce the program, let's say, pick another data point, let's say, so we get some idea of are there any direct savings as a result of that? From what I've seen, doesn't look like there are, but I'd like to hear the school department's view on that. As to, let's say, those 3 data points. We know what the exist. Hopefully, when this information comes back to us, we understand what the current situation is. But 2 other scenarios, I think, should be run in as well. So we can see if there's any real opportunity there for savings, or whether it is just a capacity issue.
Well, I mean, John, you understand that once we accept a child, we are committed to that child through their graduation.
Mm-hmm.
So a reduction can only occur at intake on an annual basis. Right? You understand my?
Yeah, no,
Right.
it's
a good question to ask, but it has to be understood within that.
there may not be any savings as
Well, there may be, which is a separate question, is what would happen? Is really what you're asking. What would happen should we choose to reduce the number coming in each year? You're asking what would be the financial impact? I think that's really
absolutely
the frame to
Or is another way of putting it, what is the net marginal cost of a medical student?
It's to me, the problem is that according to a questionable report from the superintendent that came out in March, we've got 18 empty classrooms, 18. So space isn't the issue. There's a much more complicated dynamic involved to understand this. And since the attrition can only occur because you do not take in as many students, whatever's in the system won't change. What happened at kindergarten, basically.
Yeah. The other thing is that from a marginal perspective, there's only cost or savings to the extent that the addition of an additional student in a particular classroom or in a particular school requires the addition of another classroom. And so certainly when you're bringing people in and there's the ability to look at where space is, you can sort of direct the school that someone might go to. That with some other, caveats to that, making sure there are enough students in a particular environment. And that goes back to the old theory of it's empty seats. Medco is filling empty seats. And the challenge to that back in 2014 was the fact that we were having to build additional buildings because of the increase in students, which, brought that theory into question. But in the current environment, that's.
And I made that exactly the point, which is that if you read the PSB guideline around Medco, it clearly states on a space available basis. And I'm just suggesting that constraint at this moment in time seems to have disappeared.
Exactly. If I could add, I think, and what the questions do attempt to address is, I think, one of the potential cost drivers that we should wrap our hands around is the question of special education. The state data breaks out special education costs for in-district and out-of-district. My understanding is that if a Medco student requires out-of-district special education services, that a student is essentially either returned to the home district or the cost is paid for by the home district. Not true, as I understand it, for in-district special education. And the state numbers for in-district special education, just for the special education component, runs about $30,000 a year for each IEP student in district. So that is an issue that I think we have to look at. It's not simply, is there space in the classroom, but it's the additional services that are provided for how many of the students. So that's what the questions do want to look at.
These would be aides and related additional.
Aides, psychologists, special education professionals, and so forth. Correct.
And also, as we've said before, how soon does Brookline know? We screen our own kids, we're required Boston screens, but my understanding is we get limited information on who's coming into the system, not because we want to screen them out, but just we need to know what needs we need to meet.
Yeah. And the, the issue is not necessarily saying, look, you shouldn't have the program, but rather should costs be looked at more realistically, the way that costs are looked at with regard to out of district requirements.
Senate? Oh.
No, I wasn't raising my hand, but I do have sort of a follow-up comment. My guess is that a lot of students aren't screened until they start school. So sort of an interesting question around whether you would be able to ascertain that.
Well, you're required to screen, am I correct? Because you need to know if you need to provide services pre-K. So is it there's some level of screening?
There's no required screening. There's no screening permitted prior to accepting a student.
For medical.
For medical, yeah.
I think Jay was talking about
Yeah.
for your.
But once you have a student,
residents.
you would.
So,
I mean,
but the
students are-
question was, Sarah had said that it was an issue for the superintendent as well, that Boston has universal pre-K, and therefore they have information on these students, and it's a matter of sharing that information so that we are better set up to help the students then find out they're here and gee, we should have been giving them these services earlier. It would have been helpful to know. So it's not a screening kind of thing as much as an information sharing kind of thing. And it could be that METCO doesn't allow it. I have no idea.
I'm not aware of METCO not allowing information, but we're not. We have to accept students as they come and then you address the needs as they might be.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess the question is more, we know this student is coming. It would be helpful to know that they're going to require extra help in XYZ before they arrive, at which point they're in a class that maybe isn't the most appropriate setting for them. That's the
Right, and I
point.
think the open question is whether that information exists, to what extent that exists prior to them. Right. I don't know. My guess is not a lot, but that's just
We don't get students assigned randomly. That. We have an understanding from getting.
We interview them, don't we?
I guess it would be helpful then to know what the process is for accepting.
That's
both
probably the
METCO
place
and-
to start.
Yeah.
METCO and materials fee, so that we know what we're talking about.
The Metro website says that participating school districts review applications, conduct interviews, and make final admission decisions.
Yeah.
So,
It certainly suggests that we're supposed to be talking to them before they come in.
yeah.
Maybe we're not.
When I asked the question,
Yeah,
Sarah
that would be
responded,
very
we don't get it, so. I just-
So maybe the question for the list of questions here is, what information do we get?
Right,
When? And how does that affect our ability to identify the resources necessary to provide services to the student.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, what other information that is known, right? Because I think that's kind of what linchpin here. What other information is typically known by pre-K or other programs? Would it be helpful as an input to receive? Because I think the question I have is like, you know, to what extent is that gathered? So a lot of, you know, if your child is neurodivergent or a lot of that testing isn't done until kids get into school and are expected to focus a little bit more than they are with their 3 years old people, right? There's obviously a pretty significant disparity there. So I think it's, you know, probably the most important section.
Okay, anything else on that, folks? We're talking about your program, Stella.
Yeah, I was the coordinator for the MECO program for a number of years.
Oh, would have been great if we had you for this conversation. Yeah.
So, actually, if you could look at the question and just think of any, not now, but yeah.
I have looked at them and I think they're all appropriate in a sense. And what I don't know is when MECO students start, if it's all at one time, if they can come in at various grade levels. And when I was the coordinator, this is a lifetime ago, there was a lot of kids in and out of classes at all grade levels. And it was fine.
Okay, unless there's anything else, we move on to material speak. Any suggestions for changing or improving questions for material speak?
I think we'll apply the same question to this, Bernard, that although the third bullet does mention how many students require in-district special ed services, the frequent, that would be what information do we get from parents or employees who want to bring their kids in for under material speak program? What information do we get about what services they could need in advance of their starting?
By the way, in Sarah's email that went along with, I don't know what the email was connected to, but she
It
says,
was connected to this list of questions.
yeah, but I don't know.
The original version, I think.
She says that there's questioning with, let's see now. I've known a few educators over the years who were told that their kids couldn't participate in material speak due to disabilities. I hope that's not true, because that's clearly discrimination. But what is it she meant by that? And maybe that's something that we should just clarify. I mean, if a kid, you know, if a student of a teacher with disabilities is treated differently than a student of a teacher without disabilities, I would think that that's problematic. So, I mean, if that is an issue, I think it should be fleshed out in question.
So I think the same question for me would be just a simple explanation of how we admit people into the program, what the
Right.
process is.
Yeah.
Because it used to, and I don't know if it still does, it used to be open to town employees as well.
Mhm.
But teachers had priority and their kids filled the classes, so town employees never had an opportunity. That's go back 10 years that I knew that, so it may not be the same.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, I read your email, obviously. I'm not aware of that as something that's come past me in the last couple of years, but it obviously wouldn't be fair if that happens, but
Typically, if a student has a disability that you don't have an in-district program that already exists, then you wouldn't create an in-district program to meet the needs of that student. So it would be a circumstance like that. If you have the in-district program, then you're right, it would be discriminatory not to admit the student. If the student requires an aid, that is usually not absorbed in this type of program. So sometimes the sending district will pay for that aid, but it should be class neutral and not reflective. So it's in those circumstances where you need more than what already exists.
Anything else from material speak?
Well, let me pose a question, because I'm just a little unclear myself. as I understand, this began because the superintendents over time, in order to, I think their wording was be competitive in the marketplace for quality educators, had to find some ways to overcome some of the liabilities of working in Brookline, which could be commute distance, travel, traffic, I'm not quite sure what. And the program came into being as something which was a discretionary card, if I could use that term, which the superintendent could put on the table to perhaps make the proposition of working here more attractive to a teacher. Is that roughly accurate? So I have been sort of puzzled by, it seems as if the numbers have been pretty constant over time. Well, that's not an obvious conclusion to come to, right? You would think, why is that? Or is it that there are only a certain number of these cards that can be played? I'm not quite sure. That's one part of the question. And then the other part, which is, I think, related, is so this fee, which is apparently somewhat arbitrary in its number. In 2014, 11 years ago, it was $3,500 then. And it makes me wonder, how is that the case? Why has it remained constant? Should it remain constant? What does it really reflect? And to some degree, if it has remained constant, it becomes an increasingly bigger bargain, if I can use the term, over time. So it's more powerful as a card. And there's a presumption, I think, that the community is paying some differential for that, for the ability to attract
And retain.
these educators. So that's a lot of words. I don't know how to condense the question, but does that give you a sense of something that would be useful to shed light on if you could? And to help the community here understand how it works, why it's important, and what recommendations there may be from the administration and school committee concerning the question of the number of seats and the fee.
Is there any contractual obligation for them? I don't know what's built into the teachers' contracts.
Okay, that's a question.
That's a question.
Yeah, that's a
Not
great
my
question.
knowledge, but that's a good question.
And my understanding is that this is open to other town employees also, right?
It is.
It
has
is.
been.
It's not just, yeah, it's not just educators. So surgery that educators, I think this is.
No, absolutely. And Janet made
It has been, it has been, but there were times when, because of the growth and the shortage of space, that it was only.
It was constrained.
There's
Right.
there are tiers of
Because of
priorities.
seat constraint,
I-
space constraint.
Okay.
I would assume, for example, a priority is I have one child and my other child is coming in, that you don't make the parent keep their children in two separate districts.
That's right. But other than that, there's three tiers, as I understand it. There's, if you are a teacher or a paraprofessional, you're in tier one. If you are someone who's not a teacher, you're a non-union employee of public schools of Brookline, that's tier two. And then if you are an employee of the town of Brookline, that's tier three. So tier 1 and 2 must have their needs filled completely before town employees are considered. That's it. There are several town employees who have kids in their district. So we've been able to do that over the last 2 years. And that's been a perk of hiring the first one of those.
Good. One last query that it seems to me is that if one thinks about the fee, and if one says it is sort of arbitrary, perhaps it should be a percentage of the parent's salary or some other mechanism, which is somehow, I don't know, perhaps more appropriate or more equitable.
So maybe the
to all
question,
employees.
so maybe the question should be, what are your comments to
Yeah,
make in the
yeah,
program
That's really what we're.
related to something? So, okay,
I mean,
so,
I know, Bernard, that at the school committee meeting in which we voted to, after the finance subcommittee approved, there's a small raise. We got a lot of feedback from the community of people whose kids are in materials fee program about, pricing them out by raising the fee. So I think for FY 26, it's 35 with I didn't bring the chart with me, but, you're right. It had been sort of very slowly increasing for a while. There is a discount you get if you have more than one child in the district. It's less than that 3,500. So I think it may even be 2 tiers after that. If you have 2 kids and then more than 2, it's even cheaper for those. But you're right. I mean, we are subsidizing in a sense in order to retain high quality
And that's an
employees.
investment that may well be very important.
Yes.
I'm not disagreeing with that idea.
yeah, Jeff,
We should probably, we budgeted half an hour for this, we're at an hour.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that we have to be able to have the place in the library speech.
perfect. Okay, so, let's see, we have extended day programs and summer programs, compensation and contractual provision, class size and classroom usage. What I suggest is that people, if they have suggestions for these questions, if they give them to, I guess Jesse or Sarah or
both of us.
Jim. Yeah. So,
Great, and I sent a couple follow-up questions via email.
Yes, I have.
Get at it. After that.
Oh, good question.
okay, good.
And so I think if once you have the final list, if you would just make sure Tiffany gets that, we'll put it into we'll format it, we'll finalize it, we'll make sure that any of the parallel versions are addressed, and then we'll send that over.
Yeah, we want one final, but
Yeah.
And then
I,
from Bella, from your team, just once you get the list of questions, I think an understanding of sort of when you think it's viable to get back to this group, I think will be really important.
So who was asking?
Good.
Dick?
I would just add that Sadaf there sent around a couple of questions that probably would be tacked on at the end of the section we're just talking about now. D, extended day, there'd perhaps be an E. The gist of the question was, are there other possible uses of the school buildings that could be revenue generators? And those questions came around in an email, at least to me. I think they were broadly distributed. Those should be added.
I would add to that also, and I'll send it to you in writing, other uses for other town departments, because I know, for example, the senior center is bursting at the seams. They need more space. There's a request from the new director of COA that maybe there could be more intergenerational programming. So is that a fit that could be made? And may not be, but might as well look at it.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you, Jesse,
You're welcome.
for leading that discussion. Next, let's go to town department. And we have, I see Chief Passage here, but you're not the first on the list.
Danielle Savin is. I think Danielle is there. Danielle, you can sit next to Lincoln, and I just promoted you so you can share your screen.
Great.
And this is the slide deck that was on in our packet.
Yes, yes.
Hello, I'm Danielle Saban. I'm the interim library director. So just to give you, these slides were actually prepared for the end of June. So they are fiscal 24 numbers, but we've similar sorts of services between the 2 years. We had over 546,000 visitors come in fiscal 24. We have circulated over 814,000 physical materials, and that is the 4th largest amount in the Commonwealth. We continue to circulate ebooks and e-audio. So those are the downloadable things that you're using your devices, 243,000. And of course, we still have a lot of busy interest in programs. We had over 1,400 programs with over 32,000 people in attendance. And we also continue to meet our annual goals and complete action items throughout the year. Just to give you an idea, our mission statement, I printed it here. We promote discovery, connection, and opportunity for all residents. Through our diverse resources and innovative programs, we aim to enrich the lives of our citizens through free access to information in many different media formats. We're a cultural destination and a site for learning and recreation, as well as a place where people come together to exchange ideas. We strive to be both the cornerstone of our community and a gateway to explorations of a wider world. Our objectives for fiscal 25 were to support K-12 education and lifelong learning, focusing on STEAM and literacy, partner with organizations in Brookline and beyond to increase the reach of library collections, programs, and services, implement library-wide strategy for equity and inclusion that includes deliberate practices to increase diversity both within the organization and in our collections, programs, and services, and increase opportunities for citizens to engage with library staff, collections, programs, and services without having to actually visit the library. So as you can see, it is one of our key objectives to support the K-12 education and lifelong learning. And we supplement what the school offers by purchasing items that are on the summer reading lists, for example. We don't act in place of school libraries, but we are able to partner with the school librarians and do things like school visits, or sometimes the classes come to the public library and get a little tour, things like that. So for our budgets, our municipal budget for fiscal 25 was $4,688,983. This covers personnel, which is the largest, as is typical, because books and library materials, supplies, services, and utilities. Our Board of Library Trustees also contribute about $221,000 to a library budget, which covers additional books and library materials, programs, professional development, staff development activities, staff appreciation, and volunteer appreciation. We also have two fundraising groups who raise money for the library, the foundation and the Friends. The foundation gave about $75,000 in fiscal 25 towards books and library materials, program materials, and other patron-facing initiatives. Our Friends budget was about $47,000, and it covers programs, program materials, staff professional development, staff appreciation. Obviously, these two, the foundation and Friends, are huge in supporting the library. What I will mention is that they help, but they don't greenlight everything. I can't go to them and just get anything approved. They tend to, receive a proposal, vote on it, decide if they want to support it, and for the most part, it does tend to be items or initiatives that would benefit the public. I think if I wanted to upgrade the technology in a public meeting room, they would be more in favor of that than perhaps if I asked for something on the staff side of things.
Can I ask a question? It says Board of Trustees, $221,000. Is that money that they, it's not out of their pockets. What was that?
I think that's their endowment.
There's a trust fund.
Okay, so it's separate. It's not really Board of Trustees, it's a trust fund.
Yeah, they administer it.
About what percentage of their trust fund do they spend? Do they have, we're gonna spend this amount this year, or is it more just in response to requests from the library?
I think they aim for around 4%. If we saw perhaps if we had a large request for something, a new initiative, they might draw a little bit more, but they're usually aiming to stay at 4 or below, especially if they're concerned about if they won't make as much on the.
Yeah, we're all subject to the stock market.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wherever they invest their money.
Were there any more questions? Okay.
Could you just make sure that you, it's not a correction, but just make it clear that that's a trust fund, not the Board of Trustees?
Sure. The Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners has certain requirements that we must meet in order to be certified. Each year, a municipality and its library must be certified as meeting statutory and regulatory requirements to receive state aid to public libraries. Each fiscal year, the library submits reports indicating that we meet our municipal appropriation requirement, or MAR, that we're funding our library collections at 12% of our overall library budget. We meet minimum standards of free public library service. And for example, we tend to receive around $100,000 in state aid if we are meeting all these requirements each year. And a little bit more on the municipal appropriation requirement. It looks at our past 3 years, so what the town has budgeted for us for the past 3 years, and gets that average and multiplies that by 2.5%, and that indicates what we're looking when we look to create our budgets for the next fiscal year. And looking at future concerns, we did see federal cuts to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and that has impacted our access to statewide database subscriptions. We are fortunate enough in this state to have a good program available to us that unifies has bought access to statewide databases in the past. Due to their cuts, they have decreased that service somewhat for fiscal 26. We continue to staff 3 buildings, 63 hours a week, and there's different demands based upon some, school vacation week might be a busier week, let's say, than first week back to school. What we also, I did want to point out, what we have traditionally always seen in libraries is if the economy worsens, then library usage goes up, because why wouldn't you go use this resource in your town? And then wanted to mention that programming is always in demand, but specifically for our youth, we are always busy. We always have parents and kids asking for more, and those sorts of programs are not funded with the municipal budget. That's what we rely heavily on our Friends of Foundation to do that support. And that's what I wanted to present to you all today. If there's any more questions, now's the time.
Good job.
2 really quick ones. The first is, help us understand what the town's IT department does for you, or are you independently?
We
How
do
does
a
that
little
work?
bit of both. We have an IT specialist at the library who coordinates with the town IT department. Town IT department provides staff IT resources, as well as, I would say, our infrastructure for the 3 buildings. And they might provide some support for network, internet, things like that. But what we have our library IT specialists do is focus more on the technology that's going to be for patrons' use. So we have computers that the public can come in and use at the library. Our IT specialist is, working to deploy those. He can't do that work if he's not receiving.
Who buys your computers?
We have our staff computers are bought through the town, and our public computers are bought through some of our other fundraising groups.
And the second question was related to the schools. And how do those budgets interact, or they don't interact? Do the schools provide funding to you, or are you providing them?
No, we don't have any interaction as far as budgeting. Any of our interaction is just.
It happens, but there's no contractual.
Yeah, it's like, they'll tell us, here's our list for summer reading books, and we buy them because we know the community is going to want them. That's what.
Thank you.
Yeah, Janet?
So we have 3 buildings. 2 of them are within a mile of each other, and their hours are fairly duplicative. And then we have this one out down south, not open as much. So the first question is, are the same things available at all the branches? Because I know in Coach Corner you have a library of things. You have all kinds of, we're not just getting books.
Yes.
The second question is it feasible, something you could consider, of reducing some of the hours here to increase the hours there, which would provide services that are scarce in the South. But also you do some programming for seniors there. If there were more hours available, could that be expanded? Is that something that's doable or completely crazy?
Sure. So let's start with the first question. We try to replicate our materials and services at all three locations. The two libraries in Coolidge and Putterham are smaller, so we have a little less storage space. We're not buying as many copies of the latest bestsellers. And what we do see is that the Putterham Library is open 6 days a week. Coolidge and Brookline Village are open 7 days a week. It's just the Sundays really at Putterham that we're not open. And some of the state requirements are that we're open 63 hours a week.
Right. Non-duplicative.
Correct. So if we were to, let's say we closed Brookline Village today, but kept the other two libraries open, we would count that towards our 63 hours a week. So in the event that we have had a situation where we have had to close, there was a water main break this summer. We closed Coolidge for an evening, I think. And we send those staff elsewhere to work for times like that. And then was the third question about expanding?
Well, yeah, because I know there's a program for seniors in South Brookline. And as I said before, the senior center is bursting at the seams and people in the South can't get here. Certainly can't get to the senior centers easily. So if there were more hours available in Putterham, is that something that could be done? And the reason I said sort of transferring is there's not a lot of money to say we're going to add 2 staff so that we're increasing the hours. So there's more movement around to meet the 63 hours that might saturate more of the town with service.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, we kind of, as much as I said, we try to replicate the materials and services, just because we have fewer staff, we don't run as many programs. Or at Putterham, we see a lot of young families and seniors.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they don't need, maybe a gap in between doesn't need those services, but maybe they're going to other libraries. And so we look at that and think about, okay, we should maybe don't do a program that might be aimed at new adults at Putterham. We would do that at Brookline Village or Coolidge. So I think there is, but we also still have just constraints. We would based upon the size of the building, we don't have as much staff workspace.
Okay.
So I don't think it would be likely that we would move someone full-time to another location.
Yeah, I was just thinking a few hours here or there.
Yeah, to supplement, like if someone has
Because we're tasked with reconfiguring things.
Yeah.
If it makes sense, and it occurred to me that might be one place we could look at.
Yeah, and right now we do have folks who, let's say, sometimes we just need help. Someone was on vacation and someone else called out sick. So if we have extra staff, we say, can you work a few hours tonight at a different location?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I've got one. I put my hand up, but I'll just ask since it doesn't sound like anyone's jumping in. Definitely thank you for the presentation. I'm curious about the 1,400 programs and the 32,000 people, which is phenomenal. How often have we reviewed the fee schedule for reserving spaces in the libraries? And, has that changed over the last few years? And, it looks like a pretty good deal for a lot of people, but just curious, if that's been looked at.
Yes. So I believe about a year and a half ago, the policy was changed in the library, and we no longer charge for outside organizations to use the meeting spaces. Predominantly, as you can see, offering all those programs, the meeting spaces are used predominantly by library staff. We also have some town programs or town committee meetings that may be using the space if these sort of rooms are taken up. And the outside groups that use the space, it's very in demand. And when we changed our policy to stop charging fees, we set the requirement that the programs that are going to be, the people who are going to be using the space, they're limited to using it. I believe it's once a month, and it has to be a program or organization that's of a civic educational community type of event. So if I just wanted to have my friends get together, have coffee, we can't use that meeting room, but if I'm sponsoring a talk on something I really know about in nature, that would educate the community, they would be able to use the room.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Next, police department chief. That's good.
I don't offer a break. I know you're on a tight schedule, but if anybody needs to stretch or stand up, I'm impossible to attend, actually. Because let's do what you need to do. Appreciate you all being here. I think that is it.
Yeah. Oh, this one. Sorry.
All right, good afternoon, good evening. For those of you I don't know, my name is Jen Pastor. I'm the Chief of Police. And I want to thank you for the chance to speak with you today. I'm going to walk you through where we stand right now in the police department, our operational needs, what we've done to manage costs and some potential revenue opportunities, and how we compare with other departments in our area. I'll also touch on areas where we can collaborate and how our new 5-year strategic plan is guiding our future. So back in April of this year, we completed something that, to my knowledge, had never been done by our police department before, which is that we engaged with a consultant to construct a 5-year strategic plan. It was approved by the board. Thank you. In April. And we paid for that using ARPA funds. It's helping us stay aligned with the community's evolving needs, I think, and it's something that's meant to be a fluid document that we check in regularly to make sure that we're staying on track. Our mission in the police department is simple: to protect our community through fair and impartial law enforcement and proactive crime prevention. We're committed to transparency, integrity, and impartial law enforcement and proactive crime prevention. Oh, sorry, we're committed to transparency, integrity, public service, and our vision is to be a leader in modern policing, focused on wellness, innovation, and adaptability. The entire plan can be found on our website, and I'd encourage you to check that out in all of your free time, I'm sure. But as part of that plan, we created a new mission statement, we outlined our values, and we defined 6 strategic goals, which are community engagement, staffing, recruitment, and retention, leadership and organizational structure, culture and communication, professional development, and infrastructure and technology. So our need to haves, our personnel is our biggest need to have. We're primarily in the people business. Our budget, I think, reflects that. 92% of our budget is personnel related. We can't do anything. You can take away Pat Patriot. You can even take away Bear, although I think you'd have a problem with the community if you tried that one. Take away the tents and all the fancy trucks and everything. You know, we've been in the policing business for hundreds of years before any of this existed. We're just when you strip it all down, we're about people. Right now, we're authorized for 134 sworn officers. We have 11 vacancies and funding to fill 5 of those this year. We cut about $500,000 from our personnel budget, holding 6 open spots until hopefully FY27, which means we're running at about 80% of our patrol strength. And our officers do feel that strain a little bit. our entire personnel budget for FY 26 is roughly $19 million. Training requirements are also going up. I think there's no good in having a lot of people if they're not properly trained, and that's a liability, if nothing else. Each officer in the contract is owed 48 hours of in-service training annually. That's also a requirement that's driven by both Post and MPTC. This year, MPTC, as of right now, has mandated what 40 of those 48 hours will be, which only leaves us 8 hours to address anything that's specific to Brookline or our own department. One single 8-hour training day costs us around $85,000 for the department. And those requirements can change quickly. As mandates, as laws are passed, and we need to keep up with them. Some of those require hands-on trainings that could either be 4 or 8 hours, depending, or longer, depending on, what the subject is and what the contractual requirements are to meet the needs. In addition, when officers are assigned or promoted into specialty positions, whether it's detectives, the traffic unit, or just promoted to a sergeant or lieutenant rank, we have additional training requirements. Those can run between $1,000 and $2,000 per person just for that initial training. We also have equipment needs. Right now, we're in need of helmets, shields, gas masks, crowd control gear. We are in need, and when we have our CIP meeting next month, we'll talk about the need for new firearms, possibly exploring tasers, a new RMS record management system vendor, building renovations, some of the big ticket items that Melissa knows are in the pipeline. But technology is another big gap, and I'll just touch briefly on cameras, but compared to our nearby cities or our partners in the USC region, we are way behind in terms of traffic cameras on our evacuation routes. Boston has roughly 1,300 cameras. Chelsea, which is much smaller in square miles, has 181. We have 9.
9, is it?
9. I sound like the Ferris Bueller principle, but yeah, just 9. So I feel that I understand the privacy concerns. I understand it's a bigger discussion, but I do think that these cameras are critical for emergency response, monitoring traffic, and deterring crime. They're about 20,000 each. We paid for the initial 9 using UASC funds. Unfortunately, we don't know where those funds currently stand. Our server backup is 18 years old, and we're due for a full replacement. That's about a $25,000, $30,000 expense that we really can't put off much longer. We've delayed replacing the MDTs in our cruisers, our laptops that are in our computers. Those were due for a replace in August of 24. That'll cost about $35,000 per year for the next 5 years. And I think in the past, those, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, I think those have come from CIP.
And you're no capital outlay in your operating budget.
Okay, thank you. Another item that we've been working hard with both our PSBO manager and Charlie is to get on a replacement schedule for our officers' ballistic vests. Ideally, we'll be on a 5-year replacement cycle. That would be about $25,000 each year to replace vests that are currently being worn by officers. But in addition, when the push we've made for hiring, and we've hired 31 new officers since 2022. We've had to, obviously supply a vest for each one of those new officers, and they're about $1,500.
They have expiration dates, right?
Yeah, about every 5 years.
Yeah, right. That means they have to be replaced.
Yes.
So, yes.
And on top of this, community outreach and support, I'll get into that later when we talk about what the public is asking us for. But a co-response mental health clinician would be on my wish list to cover the evening shift, the 4 to midnight shift, or 2 to 10, an impact shift when other social services are closed, but the calls come into us. Cost control measures. What we've been doing, we've eliminated essentially on all non-essential OT and programs. So most of the community service programming to include the RAD self-defense courses, basketball at the teen center, some of the other safety courses that we've been offering that we have to pay officers overtime for. just due to both staffing and funding challenges. We've used flex schedules and comp time. Our officers that are assigned to community service have been great in adapting, and they've been willing to come in and swap their shifts in order to continue those programs. But we've had to scale them back just the same. That doesn't work if we're offering programs, and the officers that are needed to run them come from the patrol division, because those officers have to be replaced during the shift, and that still incurs overtime costs. We do rely on grant funding. I mentioned the UASI grant for next year. That's up in the air. We rely on a Department of Mental Health grant to fund one of our clinicians in our CIT training program. Through EOPS, we are able to, we receive grant funding in order to participate in some of the traffic enforcement things like click it or ticket, or, sidewalk enforcement, don't text and drive, those kind of specialized targeted enforcement, that we typically pay officers to do that on overtime using grant funding. And we receive a 911 grant that covers the costs of dispatch overtime and dispatch training. New in the past year or so has been the active recruitment of lateral transfers. And so getting out of civil service with our new contract has allowed us to open our doors and take in officers that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to. We hired, I believe, it was 9 laterals last year. I can double check that number. A lot of them came from BU, from smaller municipalities that were not in civil service and therefore wouldn't have been eligible under our old hiring policies. And that's a huge cost savings to us. We figure the cost of running somebody through all the pre-employment screenings, like physicals, mental health screenings, doing background checks, sending an officer to the academy, that's about $36,000 per employee just to get through the academy. We can bypass all that by taking lateral transfers, and that's about instead it's about $5,000 just to outfit them. We've also reduced, we haven't been sending people to as many more optional trainings, and obviously cut down on travel for things like conferences, and had to decrease our presence at community events that otherwise we would participate in using overtime. We've also partnered with Town IT for cost-effective upgrades. IT has been very helpful. I have to refer to my notes here because I'm not a tech person, but we've been able to extend the life of some of our equipment. Using IT helped us to upgrade our record server with more storage and memory, which saved us thousands of dollars. And they've assisted us with a few patches that are short-term fixes. Don't replace the funding and resources we've lost or deferred, but have gotten us through to this point. Revenue opportunities. Generating revenue as a police department is a little funky.
Small.
Yeah, that's the back of the parking ticket book. So that's a guide to our officers, so we know how much to write for each fine. Again, I'd rely on Melissa to remind me when the last time we took a look at some of these fines. Maybe some of these are in need of update. I kind of put a little hashtag next to the ones that I would like to see increased, to include the handicap space, 10 feet of a hydrant. In front of a driveway, we get a lot of complaints for that. Bike lanes and bus lanes are kind of the most common complaints that come into my office, and double parking as well. So we could probably look at maybe increasing some of those fines.
Do you enforce rules on bicycles?
So pulling over bicycles is probably a separate discussion. It becomes tricky because you don't need a license to drive one. We can ask somebody to pull over if they don't listen to us. I don't want to say publicly that there's not a lot we can do, but it's unlikely.
Don't let that get out.
Yeah, Sam.
Chief, if I may, in the budget book, I was struck by the revenues that you generate, but I'm not clear. There are 2 major categories. One is the obvious one, parking court, funds, parking and court funds. But the other one you just label as departmental and other, and that's almost $5 million a year. What is that? Or am I reading something wrong?
Is part of it above details? Police chief?
No, and well, it's part of the fees, so there are fees that they charge, but I can get you the backup behind what that other number
Yeah,
is.
that amount sounds high.
I'll provide you a backup on what that number.
Am I right that I couldn't find it? Am I right that it's not in here? I only found the line item, not what.
Hi,
it was.
Sergio. This is Charlie online. The revenue is detailed in the revenue section. We added in the last couple of years a summary in departments that do generate revenue. It's just sort of like a high level dollar amount. But if you go to chapter 3, under departmental and other, which is local receipts, Melissa, it's under local receipts, departmental and other. There should be a description there, but we can get that for you.
Yeah, we just need to give him what is in the number that he's seeing in the police section, just those particular.
It's $5 million.
I mean,
Real money.
really what struck me was you got a, round number $20 million budget, you're generating more than 7 million in revenue, which is pretty interesting. And it immediately raises the question that you were starting to get at, what more might you do?
Yeah, one of the other things that we're looking at, separate from parking enforcement, I mean, there are things that we do collect some revenue for. They're relatively small, but things like when people come in and apply for, a license to carry a firearm, or they get their fingerprints rolled for a job application.
The parking meter receipts are also reported under yours as well.
Okay.
So that's
I
the
think
bulk of it. That's
that's the
$5
big
million
number.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to fines.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the two major categories are parking and court fines, which is about $2.6 million. And then parking meter receipts are $5 million. And then they have, miscellaneous fees that they charge for things like you want to get.
But what you're really telling me is that the majority of the 5 million is the meters.
Yes.
I get
Of
it.
the 7.
Thank you. Thank you.
5 of the 7.
5 of the 7,
Yeah.
right? Thank you.
The rest, we don't process that many applications for firearms or door-to-door solicitations.
Thank you.
Sure. So one of the things that's new to this year, so for the past few years, we've offered a 1-week summer program for kids entering 7th and 8th grade. This is the first year that we've charged for that. It's a relatively small fee, and this is something that partner departments in Norfolk County are doing. So we tried $100 per student. We did get a grant from Chestnut Hill Realty, so they've offered to sponsor 5 kids to attend. And we're able to do that with the help of the recreation department, who's willing to act as the body overseeing the financial through their revolving fund. We weren't set up for that. We could talk about, considering fees for services we provide to non-residents if we wanted to keep maybe the ride classes or car seat installations open as free for residents, but charge non-residents. I don't love charging for car seats. I care more about keeping babies safe, but it's something that we're talking about. One thing we're working with the select board's office is to impose late fees to anybody who sends in a late application for a liquor license. Because if it's late, if they're up against a deadline, it requires my liquor licensing lieutenant to work on overtime in order to get that processed. We talked about increasing parking fines. And with our new PSBO manager, Liz Scott, in place, she's really done a great job of trying to track down unpaid details, unpaid bills, and streamline the process to make sure that things are getting paid in a more streamlined fashion. So collaboration with schools, I think we can always do a better job collaborating with the schools. I'm not sure in our case that it's necessarily, going to increase revenue. Something that does cost us a significant amount of money is our school traffic posts. We cover, I think it's 37 different intersections with a combination of school crossing guards. I believe it's 28 school crossing guards, and those are both full-time PCOs as well as part-time crossing guards, and then 7 police officers that cover the busier intersections in the morning and in the afternoon. Those are accounted for in our budget, but what happens is, we could lose somebody, they retire, they resign, even if they don't show up for work one day, we have to fill that spot with a police officer. If we have adequate staffing on the day shift, we can just cover it with somebody that's working, and if we don't, we have to force somebody to stay from the last half shift and pay them overtime to do a school traffic post.
By the way, the crisis intervention and behavioral threat assessment teams. Now, was that done with the school resource officers before they were?
It didn't have the
Ceremoniously kicked
fancy
out.
label. The behavioral threat assessment is, something I would like to see in place, but they were the first officers in our department to receive the CIT training, in order to be able to de-escalate students in crisis and work through, connecting kids and families to resources.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a secret. That's a program I would like to see, put back.
Elvis Wong about that.
Well,
Elvis Wong about that.
we haven't had our.
Yeah,
our
I
intro
didn't mean
meeting
to.
yet,
I
and I'm
didn't mean to
looking,
intrude.
looking forward to it.
Me too.
Yes.
And I think somebody mentioned earlier with the, was it the library, maybe talking about using some of the space in the schools, or maybe collaborating more for advertising and, maybe using the gym for the rad space, to teach our self-defense courses, or partner more, for some of the internet safety trainings that we can offer to parents and kids if they're not being done during school hours. We're, still willing to partner to help get the information out. And I think collaboration goes a long way.
Where are the traffic post costs carried, Melissa?
Police department.
They're in the police department and they're not part of the allocation in the school town.
No, we provide the report at the end of the year. They provide the costs and that submit to the school department. It's part of the end of the year report, but it's not part of the town school split.
It's part of the end of your report. Is it reconciled or is it?
No, it's just an acknowledgement of
report.
the
Okay.
costs that the town bears on that business.
Helpful. I have a question, Chief, for you. So you, and maybe it's a joint question for the two of you, on the prior slide around revenue generation, the fees, you mentioned the fines rather. You'd mentioned that there were just sort of a subset of those. It seems like the meters was also just recently increased, and that's 5 million. The rest of it was 2.6, I think you said.
Yep.
Of the ones that you cited, and how material would that increase be, and how much revenue do you actually generate out of that, given that it's a subset of the actual fines that we charge? I don't have a good understanding of sort of the distribution of, what the repeat offenders are, so to speak, on this list, or where the volume comes from. I'm just curious how material I think that is.
It's hard to say, and we talked about this, I think, with meter revenue, with overnight parking tickets. Sometimes when you raise the fees, the number of offenders go down.
Yeah.
And I think we saw some of that, or we're seeing some of that rather, like with the overnight parking situation.
Yeah.
Because when we raised the fee to $30, we saw people actually seeing the value in buying or renting parking spaces. It's a little bit of a cat and mouse game. But I do think there's value here, in just reducing the number of repeat offenders, and reducing the number of complaints that come in. I think people overall in the community are hungry for increased traffic enforcement, and I think this is sort of a win-win.
Yeah.
But it's
unclear how
hard
big it
to
is.
put, yeah, it is hard to
Okay, getting the
guess, but I think it's a good question.
So kind of related to that, there used to be, I think Mike Salmon used to say that, geez, if we raise, parking meter fees by 50 cents,
Yeah.
We're gonna get X. And, it's sounded like, okay, tree's gonna grow to the sky. And I'm wondering if you have any information about any diminishing returns that we're seeing from raising parking meter fees, just because at some point people are going to say, no, it's just too expensive to park here.
Well, we've seen the behavior change too. So, a lot more people are working from home. So there's less
Yeah.
turnover there. We have the outdoor dining program that's taking up a lot of spots. So that reduces what we're able to capture. And then, with staffing issues, some of the enforcement hasn't been as consistent as it has been in years past. So
We don't have a good answer.
So a quarter doesn't cost doesn't give you 750,000 anymore. And so what normal looks like is still kind of evolving right now.
Okay, thank you.
So in comparison, comparison communities again is tricky, because it depends on what we're comparing. These aren't the same communities that we compare ourselves to when we are looking like at salaries and personnel issues, but this is, the Metro Boston Homeland Security region. These are the communities that are part of UASC. So as I mentioned, we lag behind in camera infrastructure. LPRs are license plate readers. It's something that I'd be open to exploring. And I think that we could use them for parking control as well. Drone technology is something that's evolving and being widely used in other departments. Again, I understand this is part of a much bigger political discussion. Many towns are using online licensing. I think Lincoln would agree. We talked about this a little bit. While we remain paper-based, we lack a crowd control unit. We rely on mutual aid. So if we had a big riot, and we have had them, we rely on help from Boston or Cambridge or some of the other MOP units. And that works the other way as well, where we've been called in to help in the city of Boston when they have crowds that are out of control.
Do we have a protocol for the chain of command when we use mutual aid for crowd control? Remember that was an issue a few years ago.
Right. Well, yeah, if you're the one that happened right out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a communication breakdown in the end.
What have we done to ensure it doesn't happen?
I think that was a one-off, but yeah, I mean, so when we call in other units, they're always under the command of the Brookline Police Department and the officer in charge. Typically the deputy overseeing patrol, but it can vary depending on the situation.
One quick question, beyond the paper on the licensing question. Is there a qualitative difference if it's on paper because it implies that the person has to appear before you, or does that not add any value?
So there are certain licenses, a firearms license, a license to operate an ice cream truck. They do have to appear in front of us because we need to roll their fingerprints. But there are other things like the liquor licenses or with the, 1-day permits, things like that, they're done on email and email passed around from department to department, where I think that process could be streamlined a little bit.
And in your opinion, there's a savings implied, that is a cost to it, the investment cost would be recouped?
I think the savings might be in the select board's office more than our department, or maybe your
I'm not sure about savings. I think it's efficiency.
efficiency.
That's my opinion,
Okay.
but
So
I would think the only savings, from my perspective, probably the only savings would be if your personnel who are processing it, it's quicker.
Yeah.
Because they're not making photocopies or whatever the case may be. That, in my opinion, would be the savings.
Well, but even the photocopies are a cost, right? Is that eliminated with online?
I think in some situations it could be. Yeah.
So it's something you haven't really quite understood, or
Yeah, not fully. I think it's an efficiency
is it
thing.
a question you can ask your peer communities and what their experience was?
Sure.
What did they find in making the changeover? And there's obviously an investment cost of some kind. Thank you.
Sure.
Jeff has his hand raised.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, no worries. Thanks. Thank you. And thanks, Chief, for coming to the meeting today. I was just curious if we have talked recently about overnight parking. There's so many people that pay a couple $100 a month to park their car on, somebody's driveway and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it's wonderful to not have a lot of cars on the streets overnight, but that's an awful lot of money that could be coming into the town. Has that been something that we've looked at or talked about in the last few years, or et cetera?
Do you mean in terms of increasing the fees?
From a revenue standpoint, sorry, I was too slow on the uptake. I think you kind of talked about other revenue ideas on a prior slide, but yeah, to essentially, I know we have some parking lots where you can park, and you can pay to park overnight. This would essentially be, some either limited time, limited months, limited number of parking passes or whatever we call them that would allow people that are right now either, paying their neighbor to, park on their driveway or whatever, they could pay the town and park on the street. As opposed to today, right, where we have no overnight parking. I was looking at the parking fine schedule, and $25 to if you get ticketed to park overnight, it's a pretty good deal considering how much it costs to park. So I was just curious if we've looked at reducing or removing or changing our overnight parking ban to make it into a money-making opportunity.
That I would be open to it. I think we would definitely have to bring in DPW as part of that conversation. Transportation does, we're the enforcement arm of the operation.
Right.
They kind of in permitting, and then they would want to we'd want to hear from them on how that would impact things like trash collection or snow removal or street cleaning, those kind of things. But I think it's a conversation worth having.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So real-time crime centers and UAVs, fancy word for drones. I touched on that a little bit, but I think it would be nice, to have the capability if there's a big crash or a big operation happening in South Brookline to be able to send a drone up and get eyes into dispatch on what's actually happening. Because sometimes can be, a tough commute going from this side of town all the way up there and during a major event. Just traffic is what it is. Something to think about. It's not a next year, realistic possibility, but I just wanted to plant the seed. And some things that we have looked at include, regionalizing our dispatcher, combining with other cities and towns. I don't think that's for us at this time. I think that we need dispatchers who know our personnel on both the police and fire side. I think who are used to the kind of calls we get in our community. I do think we're very different. Again, pointing to the map, everybody knows Brookline, that we're surrounded by Boston. So geographically, it would make the most sense to partner with Boston for a regional dispatch. And I think we just get swallowed up in that process. Law enforcement council memberships, if anybody's ever heard of like NEMLEC or MetroLEC, they're regionalized teams used for things like SWAT or shared resources like canines. Again, I have a similar concern when you belong to a LEC, you have to allot, usually it's about 10% of your personnel to that council. So would be in a relationship with much smaller communities that we're providing more and probably using less. So right now I'm comfortable having our own special response team, our own canines. And I think that financially it makes sense for us. Public demand and service gaps. I mentioned the evening clinician coverage for behavioral health calls. That's been on my wish list for a while. Community requests. Community likes to see our officers out on bicycles, either just regular on patrol, which we do when we have adequate staffing, or at community events. They like to see our canines, more bear than the shepherds that we have. He's much friendlier and better at parties. And also just support a community events, things like the arts festival or anything that's happening, the concerts in the park that the recreation department has. It's nice to be able to send officers to just be a familiar, friendly face. Expanded outreach tools. We have officers that are CPR instructors, mental health first aid instructors, self-defense instructors. It's great to be able to offer courses like that to the community. But a lot of times that does mean overtime costs. I did promise I'd sneak in the request for an ice cream truck as a PR tool. I won't name the deputy who's insisting on this, but it's Paul Campbell. And from that same division, they're always looking for a budget for social media tools and more recruitment opportunities.
On your evening clinician question, have you had a conversation with the Brookline Community Mental Health Center to see whether they are in a position to provide that service?
So not recent, but in the past, they have not had the capacity to offer a co-responder. And I know that they're pretty stretched in with being able to, if we make client referrals, we used to have a much easier time, prioritizing cases. They would triage people that were coming in under our recommendation, and they're just, again, it's been a little while, but they've been at capacity, I think, and beyond capacity for
Thank you.
crime transparency tools and dashboards. If you go to our social media, if you follow us at all, we put out a weekly report on what our part A crime numbers are. But it would be nice to have something that's a little bit more dynamic and people can click on anytime to see what's going on. Rather than posting on townwide discussion, I saw 3 fire trucks and 4 police cars. What's happening?
Well, even the computer that's inside the lobby of the department.
Yes,
if
damn
it
those.
crashes and things like that, that could be upgraded. So
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
could be easier to get through and, working and look further back at dates if you want to look back a couple of weeks.
Agreed. So just to bring it back to our strategic plan, I think that all the points I touched on and most of my asks, help us meet the 6 goals that we've identified. And I'm hoping that the structural gap can consider some of the public safety needs for 27.
A question about details.
Yes.
So especially like this week with all the sidewalk repairs going on and the upgrades for corners for the ADA compliance. So there are police officers everywhere standing at all these corners doing what they do. Does that put a strain on our ability to respond to everything else given the staffing levels on a daily basis?
So I'd argue it actually enhances it. The police officers that are out there, they're being paid by the private contractors. They are assigned just to that detail. They're paid by the contractors, but if there's a robbery, they're going to respond to the robbery. And so it's really more eyes on the street, more bodies. And I think that we're always going to staff the shift first, and you can consider them extra. They're not really responding to calls that come in on the radio unless it's their priority is with the detail, but they're still police officers and they're going to respond to a medical alert.
What happens when the town itself is performing work like DPW, or I think we used to do our own sidewalks or some of them? Do we charge ourselves?
Sometimes.
Police detail or not?
If we have an extra officer working, say we set our minimum staffing, for example, say it's 10 officers that day and we do have 11, that 11th officer will be assigned to the town detail. And if we are already short-staffed, then an officer will be hired at the overtime rate, which is less than the detail rate to cover the town detail.
So the answer is it depends on your staffing level, is what I'm hearing.
Right.
Hi, thanks. Does the FY 26 budget include funds for any of your need to haves?
Yes.
Like the not with 9 officers, they in the FY 20. The reason I'm asking is because my next question was going to be, thinking out what is in the FY 26 budget, is there sort of a number that corresponds to the list of items that you have in your need to haves, both operating and capital? Just because I think, we hear a lot, but we're not getting concrete information from folks, and maybe that's going to be something that's coming down the pike in a couple of weeks. I don't know, but I'm just kind of curious.
So personnel wise,
Right.
yeah, we're not budgeted for the full complement of 134 officers. We're budgeted for 128.
So we'll get that information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks.
But part of the other challenge that I think the chief is kind of facing is that there were reductions made during COVID that the department hasn't fully recovered from. So
I was just looking for, I'm trying to understand. I'm not, commenting on.
Okay, any other questions?
What about, like vehicle maintenance? How's that handled? Like
So vehicle-
police cruiser maintenance and
So anything
larger
that,
trucks that you have for, mobile holding areas and things like that. Is that done through the town or is that done through private contract?
so anything that the DPW can do, they will do.
Oh, they will. So you can schedule through them.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they do the routine stuff. Our oil changes, our tire maintenance and things like
Oh.
that. If we, not that it would ever happen, but if an officer, gets involved in a minor crash and there's a small ding, if they can do it, they can. If not, it just doesn't get addressed. Some of our cruisers are dinged up.
Okay.
If it's something bigger, then we do have to send them out. Right now, the capital budget allows us to buy about 4 cruisers per year. So we just, replace the oldest ones in the fleet generally.
How many do you have?
I
I
should
mean,
know that.
4, does it turn over on 20, on 30, on 50?
It's about in the ballpark of 25, but I'll get you that exact number.
Are these EVs or are they?
We
fashion?
have no more strictly gas cruisers. We have
They're hybrids now, not
Yeah.
EVs, but
They're hybrid.
hybrids. We have 4 EVs, but they're not the frontline cruisers. We our animal control truck should be ready any day now. But that's an EV for the first time. Our 3 cars in community service are EVs.
Is that a speed issue?
It's really about running them 24 hours and needing to recharge them
Right.
at some point. In addition, we have significant parking constraints in the back, so to have, additional cruisers that we would need would require more parking spaces and more infrastructure that we don't.
So all that charging equipment's being put in behind the station.
Yeah, we have a charger now, out in back of the station that can charge 2 cruisers at a time. So we have the 4, and emergency management has, I think, 1 that utilizes this cases.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is memos from non-presenting departments. I assume people had an opportunity to read those memos, and any questions regarding?
It's a sort of general question following up on what we've had. It would be very helpful if we could get numbers attached to all of the things that people have said they need, and maybe there are 1 or 2 priorities, because we can't do everything. It would be nice if we could, but we seem to need a lot.
That is
Unlike the schools who don't need anything.
That is correct. And we're working on that now. We wanted to give you the sense of where the needs are and the overall departmental operations. Yeah. I've been developing that in parallel with this. I'm gonna talk through it with the department heads. We have that conversation. I will say, we're already, even a maintenance of current effort is going to put us in a deficit this in FY27. So a lot of the things that are nice to have on the departmental side, it's going to be really limited in scope in terms of what we can and can't do if there's an ask for a tax increase or anything like that. We are looking at where we can tighten our belts. We're looking at what reductions we can make. We're trying to do our best in the coming months as we turn, to FY27 budget season kickoff. And so we've already begun on the capital side, but we're going to begin on the operating side just after Labor Day. Those exercises are going to involve not expansion requests, but kind of requests. And so I just want everyone to be realistic as we talk about. There's already so much that we are currently doing that is just going to, because of the increase, the pressures that we talked about, are going to put us at a structural disadvantage in FY27.
It would still be, I think, worthwhile, from an analytical and comparative perspective, to have a sense, for this committee to have a sense of what the need to haves.
Yeah.
Would total. I just think it's actually important for us to understand different sides of the ledger.
Oh, I agree. And I think we're doing that. I mean, we've been committed since the last override on the town side to advocating for town's needs. And so we really want to lay that out in front of this committee, but we also want to be realistic about what's out there. So it just, those 2 things are what we're trying to keep in balance.
Also be helpful to help the town understand, because there's always, we're barely covering what we need and everybody wants more, which may or may not align with what your staff says they need.
Right.
And somehow they need to get the message.
Well, and and that's a 2-way street.
Yeah.
We need to focus on the community. That's a big part of what this committee's work is.
Chaz, there's a big difference between want and need.
That's
correct.
correct.
Needs to learn that.
That's correct too, but I also, we are,
I don't know how old your kids are. My grandchildren are now learning that lesson.
Oh, yes, my children will never learn that lesson. They're 5 and 3, and I don't think they will.
Oh, yes, they will. Give you some hints.
Dick?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just following up on this, I'm very gratified to hear you say that you're going to be looking at possible cuts, Chaz, because as I looked at the topics that were posed, they were what vital services are not being met, what additional services have been requested, what are other things that other communities are doing that we should be doing, rather than recognizing the fact that there are probably some core and non-core, some legally mandated and not mandated. And there's a distinction between those. And I will say that the department that the police department presentation that we just saw was, to my mind, the first that really looked at some of the potential cuts that could be made or potential revenue increases. And as people have said, I think we have to put some numbers around those. And we have to think about, okay, what would happen if there is a 2.5% increase as allowed by Prop 2.5? What would happen if there's an actual decrease because of declines in state or federal funding and there's no override? What steps would be taken? And I gather you're starting to take a look at those issues, but what we've heard so far from the departments have not been presentations that have really addressed some of those hard questions. And I do think it's important that we do that, and that we do that sooner rather than later.
What we do in all of these scenarios is we prepare basically 2 budgets. We prepare, if there is an override put on the ballot, we put a budget out that says what it is that we would do in that circumstance. And we also prepare a no override budget. And that's what we're doing right now. And we are doing that analysis, and we're using, I think, fairly, realistic numbers given the federal aid situation, given the state aid situation. And yeah, it's pretty dire. So we want to go into this as clear-eyed as possible. I wanted to give the departments the opportunity to present the world of what they are already doing, and where they see unmet needs. But it's unfortunately on my end, that's where you're going to get the flip side of it, which is where are there opportunities for efficiencies, even if those efficiencies are painful for the community to contemplate.
I assume that in that analysis, you're factoring in inflation, and Sergio reminds us, because some of what we've heard is the cost for IT, for example, those licenses are just going to go up. The cost to do X is just going to go up. So,
Okay, Jesse?
Yeah, in reading through the rest of the packet, earlier in the week, Bernard, 3 things hit me. Same theme seemed to me 3 out of the 4 letters. Council on Aging has just increasing need and not enough budget for mental health services, for counseling, for activities for seniors, etc. That struck me, very, very clearly. And we heard from many people who've come to speak to us about how they need more space, they need places to do things, not available. And may not be on everyone's front mind across the town, but this is a demographic that we need to support. When I read the one on veterans, it was like heartbreaking to hear that they just barely get by. And what they were writing about need to have is just to help with rent and help with just basic support for our veterans in town. And so, we do what we can in town meeting to give them the abatement, of course, very important. But should we be doing more? Of course we should. And we're sort of looking at, more cuts that would be, just mind boggling that we do that to our veterans. And the third one was in the town clerk's office right over here. He's understaffed. He's got all these mandates of things. I'm not he because of Ben, I'm saying that they have, they're understaffed. They have all these records that have to be kept. They have, beyond the call of duty on elections and town meeting stuff that they do. And meanwhile, they're like drowning in boxes of paper that have to be done and all these other things. As I read through his thing, I'm saying they need a ton of support. And he's writing about, well, like, I really can't cut anything. He's so underfunded, it's not funny. How we operate, like we walk in through there and that window's even open, that's like miraculous. And so I think at the same time, we just have to ask ourselves, what are the things that we're doing in town budget wise? Like, big one is DPW. What's absolutely required and what could we, it'd be painful to make those decisions, but what should go into other places? I won't mention traffic calming, it'll get me in trouble, but I'm just saying that we just need to look at where are we spending our money as a town and where are these, like, people who have no voice, veterans, no voice, council on aging, sort of quiet. Well, we keep answering, but keep asking. And schools have to operate. So we need to ask ourselves, what are we going to do to maintain schools at the excellent level they have to be, but try to do it with a sort of flat budget. But the three that hit me are the ones that aren't even have a voice because they're not even coming to talk to us. We're the clerk, the council on aging, and veterans. So I think we need to keep them, uppermost too, as we're going through this.
Okay, Dick, do you still have your hand up?
Oh, well, I do, but let me just add to that. I completely agree, Jesse, that you cannot have a one size fits all. X percent across the board. There has to be a judgment exercise. I will also say that one thing that has not been brought up is the question of capacity to pay and willingness to pay. And that may be something that will affect our calculus going forward. We, among our comparable communities, we have the greatest increase over the last 10 years in taxes, at least on single family homes, which is all the state reports. We have the second greatest percentage increase of any community, following only Cambridge, and Cambridge started from a much, much lower level, as you know, Chaz. So there are significant countervailing concerns that we have to be aware of.
So I have one final question. When we heard from the planning committee, there was supposed to be a follow-up on some of the potential for new development. And so I'm happy to, well, I don't know. I don't know if they have a document or a presentation, perhaps they need to absorb that offline, but I think it is a worthy conversation. I also understand there are limited places to build in this town, but I think we would be remiss to not do that.
We are going to follow up on the planning.
Okay.
They're actually working. With many projects at the same time now, about the preservation at 16 William Street, about there's not Hill West, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I will follow up with Kara.
Okay, great, thank you.
We do need to bear in mind, though, that any significant commercial development.
Yeah, it takes time. I get it, but you know what?
You still need to understand it. Right.
In 5 years, we'll be happy we had the conversation, right? Or whatever that is.
Well, I don't know. I'll tell you, I was standing today at a meeting on Brookline Avenue where I2HQ did put the entire decking over the Mass Pike, created that tunnel sort of between Beacon and Brookline Ave, only to find out the meeting was related to construction there. But anyway, only to find out that when they finish in about 2 weeks to finish that decking, it's stopping. So I made a call later to say, what do you mean it's stopping? And this spent 5 years plus 2 years in introductory to get to the point of even doing that construction. So there are no tenants for the building that hasn't been built. There's 2 buildings that are to be built, planned to be built over the decking, and there are no tenants at this point.
The commercial office.
Yeah, it's all commercial over the Bowers next door is filling up. That's rental.
Yeah, but it's
it's
the infrastructure's there. The things go inside.
to be built. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the next meeting. Do we have a scheduled date?
Yeah, we do.
Yes, the date is next week. On Monday, the 28th at 4 p.m. in the same room you're in now and via Zoom.
Okay. Anything else on the agenda or that people want to talk about?
Well, I wanted to make one comment to you actually, that we're so happy that you're here. And that you joined our community and are working on these very difficult problems. I think that it's important that you understand in a way that our goal as a committee is to try to take this information and put it together in a way that's understandable to the community. And that means that they're gonna ask us all kinds of questions that we're asking. And we're needing to have the answers on the school side, from you and your team, in a way that we can understand it and then hopefully explain it to others. And I'm concerned that the schedule that we have set for ourselves and the load that you and your colleagues are carrying don't match. That we're promising information to the community in the fall, and I am doubtful that we will be there. So we need a candid appraisal from you and your colleagues on that point.
That's understood. So I have to check with the team,
Of course.
and yeah.
But we're also here, I think you should hopefully think of us as a resource. And that we're here to try to help if we can in some ways. There's a lot of thoughtful people here to partner with.
That's great to know, and I appreciate your words and some of this work, and I can even tell that Chaz probably started this in the spring. And so I don't have that advantage. But I will work with the team and then and with the support of the committee, and it's great to hear the interest that everyone's expressing around the table. I know you're all looking for ways to make it work. And that's how I see the questions is a way to make.
That. I mean, you guys represent now more than half the town's expenditures. And I have to say that for all the years that I've been working on this problem, which began in the late 90s, it's been a bit of a black box over there. We've never really been able to quite understand. So maybe that's something that will need to change and hope might under your leadership.
Okay, let's see what we can do.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Okay, with that, I'd like to end the meeting. And I understand that there's a subcommittee meeting afterwards.
We had to push that back. It was just like open meeting law snafu. We will meet next week after that.
Next week after the
Yeah.
Oh, so we are.
No, so sorry.
meeting,
I-
recorded by this same meeting, and then it would be 5:30 to 6:30.
Thank you, everyone.
I thought I did that a week earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ending the meeting now.
I believe we are.